All right. Are we? Okay.
I think now it should. Okay, here we are. So, hello,
Hello.
Internet.
Hello. Yeah. My name is Igor, and sorry for the slight delay. So we were just adjusting the different systems here, and my friend Arturo will be helping me with the slides because of a problem with the screen sharing. So he's gonna be flipping them for me, and probably Arturo wanted to tell something at the beginning. Yeah.
Yeah, I just I just also noticed that I had an issue with my microphone too. So the beauty of doing things live, you know. But yeah, thank you so much, Igor, for joining us for this presentation on the amazing work that you've been doing with Netalitica on the test list, which is an essential piece of the work that OONI does, but also of many other network measurement projects out there. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and I'll let you go with it.
Sure. Thank you. A few words about myself. My background is in social sciences, political science, and my research interests lay in the investigation of information controls and censorship in the former Soviet Union countries. And over the years, I had a chance to work at established institutions like the Citizen Lab as a researcher, then Siphon, like another beautiful Canadian company that produces censorship circumvention technology for the civil society. Lately, I was an OTF fellow in information controls, and out of that thing actually emerged these projects. And we set up an organization called Netalitica. Maybe Arturo, you can flip here for the second slide. What this organization is about and the project is about is updating the test lists that network measurement tools like Uniprop, Sentinel are using in order to uncover censorship in different countries. For this project, we have 48 countries throughout the world, and we developed a methodology how to do that. We also tried to establish collaboration between different researchers, tool developers, and community organizations to carry out these projects. And our ultimate goal is to advance the research on internet censorship. The workshop structure, next slide. I'm saying next slide because Arturo is changing them. Today, I'll try to entertain you. Maybe the topic is a little bit dry, but I'll try to entertain you with a bunch of slides and narrate behind at the background. So today we're going to talk about what the Citizen Lab test lists are, how they are structured and organized, how to identify bad entries in them and fix them, and how to update them with new content. So basically, it's kind of a practical workshop. And there we go. The next slide, please, Arturo. What are the test lists? Basically, these are machine-readable files that are made up of numerous URLs. Here is a brief example of like a screenshot of a typical test list. And so we're working here with a sample of interesting websites that we want to test. They are organized into 30 different categories that basically try to encompass all spheres of social life. And basically, maybe it's interesting a little bit about the history of test lists. First, they were created, I believe, 2002 by Jonathan Zittrain from the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard. And soon after that, he created, I think, the first two test lists were for Saudi Arabia and China. Started doing research on censorship in those countries. And soon after that, like an amazing project emerged involving four research institutions from Harvard, University of Toronto, Oxford, and Cambridge. And that project was called OpenNet Initiative. So the test lists for different countries were created by the researchers at the Citizen Lab. That's why we call them the Citizen Lab test lists. And they are basically, there are lists for almost all countries around the world. We created those throughout the years. I had a small contribution in the late 2000s for some of those lists. And when the OpenNet initiative project finished in 2014, I believe, the test lists were released to the community on GitHub so that everybody can use them for their projects and contribute to their further development. So that's what we're doing with our project at Netalitica. We're trying to improve the lists and update them, keep them up to date so that researchers have more accurate information when measuring internet censorship in different countries. Now we move to the different types. This is the next slide. So broadly speaking, there are three types: country lists, global, and custom. It's pretty straightforward. The country lists are designed for specific countries, and they include URLs that are relevant only to that country. And that's why most of the content is in the local language or languages. The global lists, there is just one such a list, and it contains globally relevant URLs, like, for example, social media, Twitter, Facebook, intergovernmental organizations like the EU or the United Nations, different structures, global media corporations, CNN, BBC. So you got the picture. So these are, broadly speaking, content that is accessed globally, and that's why predominantly the language there is English, but it's not exclusive English, mostly English websites. And the way the OONI probe, I'm going to talk about OONI probe because this is mostly the tool I'm using for my research and we're using in this project. The way OONI probe works is when you launch it in a particular country, so it fetches two lists to the probe, the country list and the global. So let's say I'm currently in Canada, so we're based in Toronto. So when I start doing the research here with the OONI probe, so first it's going to go and check the accessibility to the URLs from the Canadian country lists, and then it will start testing the entries from the global list and generate a report at the end. That's why the both lists are tested during every standard test. And the final type of test list, which I'm not going to cover here, these are custom lists, which are designed by researchers to answer specific research questions. You can do your own list and test it with the OONI probe using an amazing tool that OONI developed. It's OONI Run. You can literally cut and paste URLs from a spreadsheet into that website, and it will generate a link that will be tested for you. So we move to the structure of the test list, which is the next slide. You can see, so this is just a sample of the different URLs and categories you can come across in those test lists. There is a broad range of local sites in the country test list, and they might, like the URLs included, could be neutral, like cultural content, or let's say, I don't know, educational content, but it could be also objectionable content like porn or provocative attire, or I don't know, like militant and extremist type of content. So it varies. And what is important to understand about the list, about their structure, is like two things. The first thing, these are not the Alexa top 1000 websites included in the list. What we mean by this is that in Alexa top 1000 sites per particular country would include the most popular and visited content, but it usually might come from no more than 10 categories, let's say news, entertainment, human rights, stuff like this. The lists are not designed like that. They try to include content from all possible spheres of social life. So that's why we have like 30 different categories, which are not represented usually in the Alexa top 1000 sites for a particular country. And the second important feature of those test lists is that they are not designed to be block lists. What we mean by this is that the URLs in those lists are not necessarily blocked. In fact, the majority of them are not. Why we're doing this, first is to avoid selection bias in the process of testing, and second, to allow researchers to focus, to study the change in the focus of national censors. For example, let's say we have the category of news media sites. Most people would believe that we will have in the list only the blocked critical media. So this is not the case. We have all media, mainstream, neutral, as well as oppositional. Because imagine if the editor of a particular neutral online platform changes and a new one comes who becomes more critical to the government, and all of a sudden that platform is blocked. So by having all type of news included in the list, all forms of platforms, we will be able actually to catch the change in the censorship foci. So test lists are not block lists. Okay. They helped us not only confirm the accessibility, the blocking of websites, but also the accessibility of websites. So the 30 different categories, this is the next screen. They're pretty straightforward. We kind of develop them over the years, and there is like interest from the community to further diversify them. But for now, we have 30, and here they are, like alcohol and drugs, communication tools, culture, e-commerce, gambling, gaming, environment. Next slide would be the rest of them: LGBT, media sharing, news media. So you got the idea. So we try to put different contents that we come across in our everyday lives into different categories and organize the websites into those categories. Next slide. Why shall we bother with updating the test lists and like improving them further? There are many reasons, but first, because I myself, I'm a researcher of internet censorship. The main reason would be to come up with a data set that will generate a quality data at the end. So censorship findings, this is a citation from OONI, from our colleague Maria. I like that one, so I put it here. So she would, when talking about this, she would usually say that censorship findings are only as interesting as the sites you test, which is very true. So if you want to have up-to-date data and picture of the online censorship, so you better update the lists. Then researchers generate reports, and based on those reports, we raise awareness about the status of internet freedom in given countries, and those reports, in many cases, may keep authorities accountable to their actions. And final reason that I would mention here is to help local testers collect information easier and faster. I'll show you a specific slide about that, so you will get understand what I mean when you see the slide. So now we move to the next slide. Is this a graph? Arturo, do you see a graph now?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. Yeah, it is the graph. All right. So this is an example of how updating the test list actually boosts the research on internet censorship. On this graph, you can see at the bottom the different countries whose list we updated over the past year. And in blue are the cases of blocking that we identified thanks to the URLs that were already included in the lists. And in orange are the new cases of blocking, which we managed to capture because we updated those lists. So this way we can actually identify new forms of filtering that occur in different countries. As you can see in Syria, Tunisia, Saudi Arabia, the majority, even UAE and Morocco, the majority of the new cases were captured because of updating the test lists. The next graph, if we can, the next slide. This is another example how the research on internet censorship is advanced by updating the list. Here you can see the instances of block looking at this graph, you can tell that the countries in Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan, the censors in those countries are putting the stress on blocking foreign content, maybe because they pretty much have everything sorted out inside the country and they manage to silence the critical voices. So they are mostly concerned about what's generated from abroad and directed to those countries. And in the case of Russia, the approach is more balanced because the regime there is way more liberal than in Central Asia, and there are local critical voices that also get silenced from the local censors. And we move to the next slides. We're approaching the practical advice we can give you about updating the lists. Updating the typical country lists involves 3 stages. First, this is the review and removing of bad URLs. Second stage is adding fresh websites. And the third stage is balancing the lists. Briefly over the 3 stages, and then I will leave room for questions you might want to ask me. We move to the next slides, cleaning the lists from bad URLs. And you can see that in those lists, we identified a number of problematic URLs. So this is the percentages of those URLs. So the mistakes in the list, 23%, 90% in the list of self URLs had. Next slide, if we can move to the next slide. How can we identify the bad URLs and clean them? Here I would suggest that you start with consulting our guideline. This basically is the methodology that our organization is using in order to identify bad URLs and fix them. We developed it together with our colleagues from OONI and Citizen Lab, and it's available on our website. There is tab resources and load it in a PDF format. It contains step-by-step instructions how to identify the entries and fix them. The next step, once you know what you're looking for, is to download the country list you want to update from GitHub. Once you have it, you have to manually insert each of the URLs into your browser and do a content analysis of what appears, like what type of content is delivered, and record your findings. I would recommend actually to get in touch with us if you're planning to do this. We'll be happy to provide you with the test list, give you advice, and help you out in the formatting of those lists, because as I mentioned, these are machine readable files that need to be structured in a proper way, but this is nothing to do. So let's move to the next slide. In the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you the most typical problems with the URLs you will find in the country test list. So the first changeover. This is when the content of a particular platform was changed over the years, and it doesn't deliver the original content it deletes at the first place. Here is a new site from Egypt. You can see before how it looked, and now the same URL actually is an online casino. So what to do with such kind of entries? Like, naturally people would like to delete them straight away, but please don't rush, because there is one important step we should do before that. We should check whether this particular URL is blocked or not. And we want to keep the blocked URLs in the test list. The reason why is because they show us what happens with the websites that have been censored or censored over the years. Some of them might change their content, others would remain empty. Others might be up for sale and stuff like this. So we want to study that process as well. So please keep the blocked sites in the list. And how to determine if a given site is blocked or not? We're using the OONI Explorer platform. Probably if you're attending this workshop, you're familiar with it. So in that platform, you can selects any country that has test lists, and props are run in order to determine to see whether the URLs in those test lists are blocked or not. So if they're blocked, keep them. If they're not, delete them. Next slide, please. It is dead websites. Here is another example of a human rights platform from Egypt. If it is blocked, which is the case, we keep it in the lists. If it is not, we delete it. Next slide. It's an example of an outdated website. In this case, from Sudan, political criticism sites. Last post was 2005. So what to do? And if sometimes there is an old platforms that don't generate any traffic. If this is the case, we delete those. If they're still popular though, we keep them in the list. How to determine that? You can go to Alexa and check whether the particular URL still generates some interest. For example, there were like a case recently in one of the MENA countries whose list we updated that a particular news site was not updated for free. It was still popular. The reason why it was not updated was because the editors were in jail. So basically we believe that when they get out of there, they might revive the project, but still, if people are still looking for information in a given platform, we keep it, don't delete it. Next slide. This is an example of a domain for sale, like a blogging platform from Tunisia, currently up for sale. In those cases, we try to see whether a particular platform moved to migrated to a new domain name. If it did, we update the URL in the list. If it didn't, in all the cases, we delete the URL that is for sale. And the next slide, it is an example of a purge social media. You can see here with the chimpanzee on the left and currently what appears on the right. So if this is the case, we try to see whether the particular block moved to a new domain or to a different platform. If it did, we update it in the list and we delete the old entry. By the way, in all of these cases, when you run an OONI probe, it may show you in the results that these particular URLs are accessible. And if you try to generate a report based on this type of data, it's going to be completely flawed because, as you can see in all of these cases, you're actually not accessing the actual content for which the particular URL was entered in the list. And all of those critical platforms are long gone. So basically, that's why maybe they're already accessible. They're not blocked any longer by the censor. That's why it's important to update the lists. Next slide is about domain redirects. Like, for example, this platform on the left comes from the Egyptian test lists and violence against women. If you enter its URL, it automatically redirects a completely irrelevant content like this content, I believe in Mandarin, probably, I'm not sure. So in those cases, we delete the URL and we check if the platform migrated to a new domain and update it in the list. Finally, I believe this is the last example of irrelevant content in the list. Some of the URLs, for some reason, I don't know, were included and were not supposed to be there. Like, for example, this Irish medium in a Ukrainian test list. So we delete those. And the next slide, it doesn't give examples, but it actually shows another typical mistakes you can come across in the test lists. Duplicates. We delete the duplicates. Duplicates can be within the list or between the country list and the global lists. Then we delete the duplicate from the local list, but we keep it in the file in the global one. Or some entries might be wrongly categorized. In those cases, we fix the URLs. We don't delete them. We just put the correct category. Why this is important? For example, you want to study how national censors are approaching LGBT content across a couple of countries in sub-Saharan Africa. So what you're going to do in this case, you're going to run the OONI probes in the countries of interest to you, and then you're going to filter the results by category. So, but imagine that some of the countries don't have any content in the LGBT section, or some of the LGBT content is not properly categorized. You will not be able in that case to complete your project because of the wrong categorization. That's why we update the categories as well. We have other mistakes like all domain names which we update, or URLs that we believe have global relevance and we move the country list to the global lists. Also, we tend to delete individual Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube pages because those are already delivered using the HTTPS protocol, the secure one, and it is not blocked at the moment. And we tend to keep up to 5 such individual pages per list for control purposes in case censors learn how to do this in the future. And next slide, it's a graph. It shows you the mistakes we identified in the lists from all the countries we currently updated. These are 28 states here, and you can see that in 90% of the cases, the mistakes of the sort that we just discussed were 50 or up percent, reaching all the way to 90%. So this shows you that the lists were pretty accurate at the time when they were created, back in the 2000s, early 2010s, but now many of the entries of them are obsolete and then need to be fixed in order to generate proper results and to be reliable when you're writing your reports. Next slide, please. The next slide gives you, I mentioned at the beginning, that updating the test lists and mostly reviewing the old test lists for bad entries will help local testers. Here is an example how. This slide shows you how much faster the network measurements are run after the update. So the improved speed can go up to 43%, depending on the case, because we delete the dead URLs or domain redirects and stuff like this. Okay, so now we move to the next slide, which is step 2 in the process of updating the test lists. It's going to be I'm going to go faster over this section. This is about adding fresh URLs to the test list. This is what usually people do when they think of updating the list. So over the years, many of the lists have been updated with new content, but nobody has actually reviewed the existing URLs, and I just showed you why this is important. So in case the country list that you're going to use is not updated, here are a couple of suggestions how to do that with fresh content. First, you can start by researching the social, political, and economic background in the country. You can start with Wikipedia or the World Factbook in order to identify the party system, the minority issues that might be present on the ground, geopolitical conflicts, basically what the country is troubled by. And once you identify sensitive topics, you will be able to search for corresponding sites for those topics. Another, in parallel, you should also research, investigate, or examine, research on internet censorship conducted by various organizations. So those could be research institutions like, for example, the Citizen Lab reports or the OpenNet Initiative reports, or could be digital rights organizations like Freedom House, Article 19, Reporters Without Borders, as well as local digital rights organizations like Sinar Project for Malaysia, Venezuela Inteligente for Venezuela, and so on and so forth. You could also follow local media reports and also global media like Global Voices, for example, about content that's been blocked recently in your country, and you can add those URLs to the lists. You can also check the blogs and social media of digital rights organizations or activists, and sometimes also the social media platforms of the communication authorities themselves. Here is an example, like for example, Russia, it's called Roskomnadzor, the governmental structure that monitors the internet and is in charge of the blocking. So basically they have a pretty vivid and pretty lively experience in the social media, so they're pretty active there, and you can find on their social media channels often information about what is blocked and why it is blocked, so you can update the list based on that information as well. Another method is to reach to targeted or blocked organizations. For example, news media. I did this in the past as well, and you can ask them who do you think might be blocked in the near future from their colleagues, or what other agencies are already blocked but it's not reported in the media, so they can willingly share this information with you. And yeah, these are a couple of suggestions how to start with identifying new entries for your test lists. The next slide, just bear with me a little bit longer. This is how to enter the new URLs. It's pretty straightforward, but important to stick to the established format because these are machine readable files. You should enter the URL exactly as it appears in your browser. So just copy paste it in the test list. And if Arturo can go to the next slide, there is a screenshot of a typical. These are the additional columns you should fill with content. The first one is the URL itself. The second one is the category code and the category description. Is it a news media? Is it a human rights? Is it like a different category? So all those categories are available on GitHub as well, and in our guideline they are on the last page, so you can see them there. It's important also to add the date of when you made this addition to the test list. The source, that would be you or your organization, is up to you if you want to put it there. An important column would be the notes. If there is additional information that is important, you can insert it there. And now we go to the next slide. It basically shows you our efforts over the last year to add new content to those 28 countries we've updated. You can see that this is the new URLs as a percentage of total. You can see that in most of the cases, the new URLs were more than 50%, so it's a complete rehaul of those test lists, and they're actually updated on GitHub and now, I believe. The next slide is the final stage of updating the lists. Is about balancing the test lists. Just with 2 sentences, there is it is important to populate all category URLs, and we call this